Concord Show.
And co-host Marine Corps Map, coming to you on Monday and Tuesdays in Studio A, noon to 2 Eastern.
And Studio B on Wednesday nights, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Eastern, with educational, instructional, information, and situational update, often with wonderful guests on the current landscape in the U.S. and overseas.
This is a go.
We are with you, side to side, and back to back.
Please join us on Monday through Wednesdays.
As well as other hosts and guests here on Revolution Radio.
We're not gonna take it anymore. That's right, we're not gonna take it anymore. We said we're not gonna take it anymore. That's right, we're not gonna take it anymore.
I'm Reverend Medium Tracy Lockwood, and I'd like to invite you to join me as I discuss life from a medium's perspective. I'll be talking about insights that I've gained through readings with topics like your guides, angels, animal communication, past lives, our transition, and the afterlife. We'll take a deeper look at the metaphysical meanings of symbols and totems, and I'll give you some practical exercises to help you develop your own natural psychic ability. Join me on From a Medium's Perspective.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, it's time to stumble down the road with host Bridgette Lynn Dolgoff and co-host Jannie Vaughn.
Hi, everybody. I've been having technical difficulties this morning. This is Bridgette Lynn Dolgoff, and I am your host of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes. And Jannie is out today. My computers, two of them decided that they were not going to work, and they were going to actually upgrade themselves for the last half hour. So I had to hurry up and get on my tablet, and hopefully my tablet will hold for at least the first hour, and then I can get onto the computer the second hour. So anyway, it's kind of a crazy morning, and I suspect that it has
and digging holes. But I won't be there.
The hell I won't.
Hey, anyway, sorry, didn't know where I was at in the call or in the getting on to the radio show. Anyway, just had some serious technical difficulties this morning with most of the computers that I have, and they all wanted to upgrade and do all kinds of crazy stuff. So I have on my tablet. Sometimes my tablet overheats, so hopefully the computer will be done with the upgrades, and the second half of the show I can move onto the computer if that happens. So anyway, I've got, problem solved as best as I can. This is Carrying Stones and Digging Holes. Jannie Vaughn is going to be out. I'm Bridgette Lynn Dolgoff. Also, I have a really bad cold, so I apologize for any kind of coughing attacks I might have. It's been a really long week, and I don't know about other people, but I got a really bad chemtrail virus about a week and a half ago. So been battling it with every type of alternative medicine and therapy. So I am on the mend. Okay, so Carrying Stones and Digging Holes is on Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can go to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, and you can click on the Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slot on Studio A, and you can see the bio for Jannie and I on there and information about our show. Also, while you're there, Revolution Radio is 100% listeners supported. That means you, if you're listening, we're supported by you. So if you like our shows and you want to support us, go to the website and go to the funding and, click on and donate what you can. And if you want to get something out of it, then go to the heirloom seed selection and pick an heirloom seed package that is right for you. And then we will also be supported in that. To be able to help Jannie and I with our work with the radio show and also outside of the radio show, you can support us by going to PayPal and donating at consciousness of economics at gmail.com. Again, PayPal, consciousness of economics at gmail.com. All right. So anyway, today I kind of had a feeling that the computers would act up. There was just all kinds of crazy stuff going on because of what I want to talk about. So I'm going solo today, and I'm going to talk about a topic that isn't really talked about so much, even in alternative media. And I always want to let people know that I'm going to be talking about my experience. I'm going to be talking about my experience, and I'm just trying to problem solve here a little bit, just to make sure that people can hear me on the show. I have no idea with this tablet and the headphones and stuff like that. So it looks like people should be able to hear me. So we're gonna go with that. Okay, so the topic that we're going to talk about today has to do with, hold on one second. I think my computer may have decided to work. So I'm just going to talk to you real quick while I go over there and look and see if I can't switch over the show to that computer system, which would be a lot easier for me because I would know exactly what is going on instead of trying to figure out on another computer or tablet platform if I'm actually got a show going or not. I can't tell if people can hear me or they can't hear me. So if there's anybody that I know that's listening, can you give me a sign that you can actually hear me on the show? Hold on one second. I'm bringing up my Skype on the other computer. All right. So today's topic that I want to talk about has to do with star kids. And there aren't a lot of people that know a lot about this work. And I'm talking about my experience, right? I'm talking about my experience being born as a star kid, first lifetime here on this planet. And my experiences on this planet, my experiences off of this planet, and still waiting for the other computer. Okay. So my whole life, I've looked for a lot of other star kids and star people. I believe that there's been one actual star person about my same age that I momentarily had sort of kind of a communication with. But every other person that I've come in contact with that has made claims about being a star kid or a star seed, I have no idea what that word means. I have no idea what the word star seed means. I think that it's some kind of propaganda that people have attached themselves onto and created as a part of their reality. Because I have no idea. My star family does not talk to me in those terms. So how do I know that I'm a legitimate star kid? I've had contact with all kinds of different extraterrestrials since the day I came here. My family My family, hold on one second. Let's see what we've got here. Okay, good. Everyone can hear me. Woohoo! This is a good sign. No. Okay, this computer's up, so if anything goes on with the tablet, then I can switch over to the computer. So we're good to go. Awesome. So now I can kind of relax and, get into it. So I know that I'm a legitimate star kid because, number one, my star family has told me that. Number two, certain kinds of ETs that are negative on this planet that actually do a lot of medical, biological material collecting, actually have helped me in my life. So over the course of my life, I have had 6 major head injuries. Several of them I should have never even survived. I should not be able to talk. I should not be able to walk. I should not be able to have any kind of intelligence. And at every turn when these head injuries were incurred, the extraterrestrials who deal more with the medical end would take me and would do surgical procedures, on my head and on my brain. I mean, I still physically in this world would have to take, long periods of time for that to actually physically heal, but they would actually fix most of the damage. The first major head injury incurred in the moment that I came into this life experience. And you can see it in my natal chart, in my astrology natal chart. You can actually see it there. I have Pluto right on my ascendant at 25 degrees. And you can see that Pluto was kind of temperamental at the moment that I was taking my first breath. And it's not, so you can see kind of like where the damage would have occurred, or I would have had major birth trauma. So, and that's what happened. My mom was in labor for, over 24 hours. I was a 10-pound baby. She was small. My mom probably had gestational diabetes during that time frame. And so back then they didn't really have C-section. So they used forceps to actually grab me by my head, got me in the birth canal stuck and grabbed onto the top of my head and in my mouth with forceps and literally pried me out until I came out. And so there was in the medical files that I would be severely retarded and would have to be taken care of for the rest of my life. But that didn't happen. Star people fixed me. The second major head injury, I was hit in the head with a full army rifle, and at 6 years old, and it completely split my head clean open. And my parents found me unconscious outside with my brain actually hanging out and exposed. And they rushed me to the hospital, and I ended up surviving. And again, I was taken, and they fixed me up. So over the course of my life, I've had a lot of head injuries, and we'll discuss why I've had those head injuries because it became apparent during a visit from my star family in 2014. But so one of the things that started to happen, I was lucky enough to be a star kid that was implanted into a family. However, my family was being handled. There are bloodlines on the planet, tribes, bloodlines, original families that are good, that are not really talked about that much. We hear a lot about the Cabal bloodlines or the Illuminati bloodlines or the Anunnaki bloodlines or some of the other extraterrestrial, human creation bloodlines that are negative, warmongers, power crazy, aggressive. But there are a lot of us that come from ancient and original family lines that our genetics and DNA have the ability to heal, to make well, to fix, that have a relationship with the earth and know how to use certain plants or communicate with certain plants and have relationships with those plants. So on my mom's side, I'm still researching it. There wasn't a lot talked about about my great grandmother, but I believe that my great grandmother had some Native American in her. Well, let's not call it American. Some natives don't like to have that word added, but we'll just say Native people. She had unbelievable abilities as a medicine woman, and she raised and trained me till I was about 8 years old. So part of her lineage and the lineage that goes down through my mother's line on the women's side, and we have like really strange things. We predominantly only give birth to females. The females look almost identical. There's either a blonde or a dark-haired version. We all have seriously naturally curly hair. We all have like the same fingers and toes. We all have like the same like really strong body structures and the way that the body structures look. So in that line, we have a medicine person or a shaman. The next line is usually a prophet, and then it kind of goes down through those lines. But some of it's been kind of broken up, and I'll explain what happened in our family with the reptilian bloodline that came in. So my mother was handled long before I came, and this is because of the bloodline and my family. So I didn't know until my mom was 5 years dead, until my grandmother actually came clean, that some, wealthy guy came around and was dating my mom, when my mom just got out of high school. My mom had a really strong desire to be normal, to leave the family. And there were a lot of other things going on during that time frame. My mom was, because of the reptilian grandfather who stepped in as the second grandfather and my mom's stepdad, there was ritualistic sexual abuse, which is pretty common when you're trying to destroy the minds. It happens with super soldier people. It happens with MK Ultra. It happens with very highly developed, brilliant, intelligent people, star kids. It happens too. So he, had been coming around and decided he was going to marry my mom. It all happened really fast. So they had a wedding in California, and then he took her to the East Coast. My grandmother never met his family, his wealthy, family, probably reptilian, or, probably was involved with some kind of, mind control programs of handlers, and took my mom away. My mom thought, hey, I'm getting the fairy tale story, been swept off my feet. I've got this happy ever after, like I'm a princess kind of a thing, blah, 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 blah. Well, nobody hears from my mom for months and months and months, like 6 months, and my grandmother gets a letter. So back then, they didn't have cell phones. Some people didn't actually have phones. And so everything was done kind of with correspondence. Not a lot of people flew on airplanes. A lot of people couldn't afford it. And my family was pretty much poor. So my grandmother gets a letter saying that this man and his family had stuck my mom in a mental hospital as soon as she hit the East Coast, and made up all of these lies about my mom. And meanwhile, my mom was in a mental hospital for 6 months, literally strapped to a board, given electroshock therapy daily, drugged, raped, and completely fractured and destroyed as a being. The only thing that was left of my mom when I was growing up was her ability to work with the dirt and plants. And she had this kinship with them. And it was the only place that she could kind of be who she was. So I grew up with a mother who was terrified of my abilities, because my abilities far exceeded anything that my family had or had been involved with. But my great-grandmother was so good when I was younger, and my grandmother, about coming to visit and trying to handle and manage me in kind of a positive way, and trying to manage my mom from going completely, bat poop nuts, because all my mom could think about my whole life was don't get in trouble. Like that I was leading to her getting in trouble, which meant that she could go back into this mental hospital and she could be punished, right? And so she was punished for something she doesn't even know what she was punished for. Because once my grandmother sent the money back, put her on a bus, because my grandmother said there was no money to put her on an airplane. There was no money for my grandmother to go back to get her. So they had to put her on a bus, like totally fried out of her gourd. And when she got back, my grandmother just said she just was never the same, never really the same. But she still had these amazing, genetic DNA qualities of work that she could energetically harness to work with plants. And I remember growing up, and we lived in a place where it was a total sand desert, and she literally could grow squash plants taller than people in desert sand because of her ability to energetically work with the plants. They would literally serve her in her highest and greatest desire of what they could be. So this is, before I was born, this is all happening to her. And then on my real dad's side, who I didn't really get to grow up with, sometimes we, have kind of meetings, but he was hiding from the government. He was from, more and more I learned about my family lines on his side. And from the Russian lines, and, our family on his mother's side, we know for a fact, crossed through the areas of Mongolia and Russia. And so we have this shamanic, like real time. The word shaman is actually a Russian word. So we have this Russian, shamanic line that is innate in us in our DNA strand. So we have abilities. And then I'm still really looking into his other Russian part of his family who also, came here. So both of his parents were total 100% Russian. Their families were Russian. Their families came here to escape like the revolution in Russia and things like that. And they were, magical people that had also abilities. And my dad ended up getting kind of a double dose of that. So like me, I had a double dose, and then I had the Star Kid influence on top of it. So there's no possible way that I could ever be normal on this planet. And no possible way of any kind of normalcy, no matter how. I had to work at being normal, right? I had to work at pretending to be as human as possible and watching people's traits. And I'm so good at trending because I can watch people's personality traits and I know exactly what they're going to do. I know exactly what their behavior is going to be. I should have probably been like a forensic something or other, dealing with some kind of forensics and profiling. Anyway, so what happened to my dad was that he was handled before I was born, and in his background. So there was a lot of things that happened, and he ended up stepping away from his family, and his family, up until recently, hadn't really even known what had happened to him on his mother's side. And I just went there. I just got in contact with his mother's side of his family, 6 weeks ago, and went there and had, conversations and met them. And they're super awesome people, and they're a lot like me. It's interesting how, when you have these positive bloodline attributes, to help and save and heal and do all these things, like you can't get away from them, no matter how hard you try. You can't outrun them. Eventually, you will just succumb to it, and you will just do that work. So anyway, my dad was basically chased around by the government in the 60s because they were trying to kidnap him. He, at the time, was going into people's houses and properties, and he was eliminating the demonic shadow, multi-dimensional negative activities in these places, which tells you a lot about his power. And so he would get calls and he would go in and he would take care of some of these things. So the government had kind of heard about him. And this is kind of during the time where, remote viewing was really kind of ramping up for NASA. And NASA's never been about space. It's never been about anything like that. And I'll tell you a story about me and NASA down the road, multiple kidnapping attempts. So a lot of this stuff in my life was happening to me, yet I didn't know that this kind of stuff had already happened to my family, until later on. And so I had to kind of wade through it. And the problem is that I was so psychic and so clairvoyant that I could actually read people's minds. I could read their behavior. I could read energy signatures that would be coming my way long before the things would come my way. Or I would go into the dreaming realms and I would have like a download, or something would happen that I would know to be on high alert to be aware of what was coming at me, and maybe to move, pack my stuff up and move, or just to, be really careful, or in that particular day, put myself in a very big public setting, right? So it was harder to, target me. Meanwhile, I couldn't really talk about a lot of the stuff that was happening to me. My entire family basically died from 98 to 2003. And after that, I was pretty solo. And that's pretty much, some of the reasons that I live out of my van and I kind of come and go different places is to kind of change things up so that I'm not like a major sitting target. It's not as bad as much anymore. I've had native and shaman people that I've worked with have put in protection for me in my energetic field, so I can, toss off some of this stuff that comes at me, even electronic targeting. My computers get it pretty hard, but I very rarely get an electronic target that affects me anymore. So my dad was being targeted by the government because of his abilities. And they didn't really want him because for remote viewing. They wanted him into their programs so that they can study him and do all kinds of stuff. Once you're in their programs, very few people actually get out and very few people actually talk about it. So the government was trying to gather him up, was trying to kidnap him. So he goes to this one location. He gets this one job to clean these people's houses out, and he finds out it was a handling situation, that the whole situation was being handled to get him in one location. And all of the psychics that they had in their team in NASA actually descend power onto this house and literally fry my real dad. Fry him in such a way that after that he was completely terrified, and he, pretty much went underground. And then, in October 2016, I get a call from the Spokane coroner's office that they have my dad on ice, that he died. But, when I went there to claim his body and all that stuff, his apartment was a total setup, so they used him. Even his healthcare worker that came to visit him said that he shouldn't have died. So, there's always these situations where, in my life that I have to go into where I'm constantly being handled and managed. And, they are noticing things about me, where am I at and different things. So when I was, let me just look at my notes, because I wanted to make some notes about things that I thought may be important. Okay. So when I first popped out into this world, I had all kinds of head injuries and trauma. I also didn't really deal with this world well. And one of the things that I find out is people who have, I'm not going to call them star kids, but they have what they call the RH negative, or more of what they would call a Nephilim blood. They're put into that category, but you know what? I don't think a lot of them deserve to be put into that category. But they'll have things like similar things that I have genetically. 8 vertebrae in their neck versus 7. I have a sacralized fusion. So my whole sacral area is fused to the my bottom two lumbars. I have more nerves in my teeth than dentists can even deal with. And it takes huge amounts of, Novocaine, and usually they just give me so much nitrous oxide that I'm like completely unconscious with tons of Novocaine in order to drill into my teeth, because I can feel it because I have so many nerves. So dentists get really frustrated with me until they, see all the roots and stuff like that, and they fully understand that, like there is something to it. I'm not just complaining because I'm a big baby. So there are a lot of people on our planet that have that kind of stuff, and they usually move into, the ones that are on the positive side. They usually end up in positive things, alternative healing careers, alternative medicine, alternative therapies, herbalism, because at some point they don't fit in with the rest of the world. They don't vibe with what's going on, and they have to move out of the system into their own system. Kind of a situation. So between ages of 4 and 5, so when I was about 4 years old is when, let's call them the undercurrent dark beings. They were like shadow figures, demons, whatever you want to call them. They started communicating to me. We lived at this place, and I would watch literally holes break open in the soil. I would watch the dirt kind of break open, and then I could hear the voices like, calling to me. And those were my first experiences dealing with them. At that point in time, I didn't realize, like, my grandmother on my mother's side, my great-grandmother also was an exorcist, and her daughter was an exorcist. My grandmother was a Holy Ghost, if you want to call it that. She hid in the Pentecostal church because she could use her talents and abilities. And she was a full-fledged prophet from the day she was born. She also had, an ability to channel certain beings for the highest and greatest good that would channel through her body. And in Pentecost, that's okay. You can speak in different languages, and you can speak prophecy loudly in the church. So my grandmother was really well known for this kind of stuff. And she also released demons out of people's bodies. So the first time I ever was in church, I'd spend summers with her. So kind of trained by her as well on some levels. The first demonic being or shadow being, or they're really reptilians without bodies, that I saw be released out of somebody's body was when I was 6 years old in the church. And everybody, 5,000 people in that church saw it. And it left the person and it went away. So this is the thing, is like sometimes healing can be super spontaneous if people get the right person to help them on their journey. And like I've brought on the show Muwanji Hassan, who's a good friend of mine and my business partner with Original Medicine, that we hope in the future we can have conferences and we can bring a lot of original medicine people to the forefront to speak and lecture and do workshops. I mean, that's our main goal, to bring this kind of medicine out to the forefront, right? So people can understand it, maybe even get trained in these kinds of things. But when the pharmaceutical companies they know exactly what's going on. And most of the pharmaceutical drugs that people are taking right now block the neurotransmitter in the brain. People don't understand what this does. When you block the neurotransmitter in the brain, you block the brain from communicating to any part of your body whatsoever. So that means it's an open vessel, like a house that's vacant, that can be used for squatters. So you start taking opiates, you start taking things that block your neurotransmitters. Now your body is an open house for a boogie hotel, so that you can have all kinds of, friends moving in. And so the brain doesn't send electronical signals back through the body. So number one, your body never regenerates itself. It never can regenerate itself. And say your heart regenerates itself every 6 months. You start taking those opiates, you start taking those neurotransmitter drugs, game over. your body will never be able to regenerate itself again. Ever, 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 ever. So you are literally like a vehicle that's also dying, which makes a really attractive place for some of these, disembodied reptilians. And then they move in, and some of them are gangs. They move in like gangs. So sometimes a lot of energetic work is not going to help a person. Chiropractic care is not going to help a person. A lot of these things are not going to help a person if you are on opiates or you are taking anything that blocks the neurotransmitter of your brain. Because these things are to activate the brain to pay attention to what's going on in the body. But if you are taking neurotransmitters, blockers, there's none of it is going to be able to work. It's just not going to help you because your brain is not active and it's not connected to your body. So you're like a zombie, I guess, basically on a lot of levels. And, you still are emanating energy, and these things like to move into you and harness and use your energy for their will for, a period of time. So it's really important that people realize, like, not only are drug companies making a lot of money off the backs of people, but they know exactly what they're doing. And there's an agenda. And so there's all these different agendas, but now we're getting into the agendas that people don't talk about. Family bloodlines that have abilities to heal anything, anywhere, at any time, that have, all kinds of information and oral history that's, embedded in their DNA, and their abilities. And then, you also have star kids that have been coming in here, and those have been really ramping up. And then you have, this multi-dimensional agenda. So let's get past 5G. Let's get past, all transhumanism and all these other things to what's really going on multi-dimensional. And those are the kind of things that are going on. So in my line of work, I end up dealing with a whole bunch of people who have demonic possession, or their homes have demonic possession, but they're really disembodied reptilians that travel back and forth multidimensional. They leave their bodies like, a suit in a meat locker hanging until they're going to get back. And their main agenda, is to get bodies and, to be here and, gain residence and then jump. Usually if you have someone that in a family that has had some kind of demonic possession or mild, medium, and they die, those things are going to jump to somebody else in the family because there's some kind of connection usually that is going to stay in that family line. Okay, so when I was a kid, between 4 and 5, well, I always had lots of weird experiences too as a star kid growing up. Always was super strange. You could probably go back and talk to people who went to school with me, especially in high school. That's when things got really strange for me, when things really started to ramp up on a multi-dimensional level. But between 4 and 5, I went through 3 really major fevers during that time period. And so I didn't even really go to school. And during those fevers, I would get brands that would be branded from the inside of my body onto the bottom of my feet. And they are also, if you look online, they are included in stigmata. So basically, I had 3 reoccurring stigmata burns. Always smelled like roses, never smelled like burned flesh, was like the real deal. But I've never bled. I've never done the stigmata bleeding, but I have had the burns. And between age 4 and 5, those are the only times that I had them. And I'm not going to talk about the 2 different symbols that were burned onto the bottom of my feet because that's my personal stuff. But I will tell you that they were 2 different energies uniting in me to bring here. And still I'm working on, exactly what I'm doing with them or exactly what I'm supposed to do with them. And sometimes I don't think that humanity is going to make that turn during my life experience. And so I'm not really even sure, even though I've been put here to do a job, I'm not even sure that I'm going to be able to carry out my job because things are moving way too slow in this reality. And the people in this reality are so buckled with, demonic entities pharmaceutical drugs, toxic food, vaccines, chemtrails, poisonous air, that they're so buckled that they're not even really being able to wake up. And it's taking a huge act on their part to try to do one little thing to control their life, to try to get themselves, into a health situation. And I can't even imagine what it's like for people to try to get off a lot of these pharmaceutical drugs, because they attach into your DNA. And literally, if you try to get off them right away, they will kill you. These drugs will kill you. You will die because you're not getting, these drugs in your system. Okay. So between 4 and 5, I end up having a stigmata. During that time frame, when I come out of it at age 5, thank God I just had an amazing, the women on the women's side of my family were just amazing. I mean, my great grandmother and my grandmother showed up on scene every time I was going through these really heavy fevers. And I mean, what are they going to do? Take me to the hospital so that the government can say, oh, look, you guys are, branding her feet, and oh, now it's, like some kind of abuse. So, a lot of this stuff had to be kind of hidden and concealed. So it brings it to another point. My whole life, I was taught to hide and conceal, and only, pull back my power in a way that I only could show maybe a little bit of it. And I do sessions with people all over the world. I do what I call seated shamanic sessions by computer, and, to help people move through a lot of the stuff. But I'm only used maybe a quarter of my power, because that's how much I have to hold back. And I've had to learn how to hold it back, because if I let it go even to like 50%, it makes people crazy. My energy starts to bother them, makes them crazy, and so then they want to attack me. They want to accuse me of things. They just kind of go bat poop crazy. So I've learned that I've really had to, because it forces a lot of their darkness, their irritation, internally, their discomfort. And since so many people are not really good at dealing with their own stuff, dealing with their past, dealing with what's going on in their reality, their unhappiness, their depression, their road of life, then they have to actually lash out. So I've always got to, be on task to keep my power downgraded from too much going on out in the outside. And it can make whole cities go nuts. I've been in places where I've ended up getting in an argument with somebody in an apartment building. And because I'm not containing my energy field and I get really mad, and that energy goes out like an explosion, all of a sudden, like within a half hour, the whole building will be crazy. And people will be like fighting each other and screaming. And so the thing is, I've learned is that being a star kid, now adult, age 50, I'll be 50, is not an easy thing. Trying to act normal, trying to contain all your energy, trying not to stand out, trying not to show your gifts. But we're the ones that, have come. Sometimes I think my star family has sent me here to figure out what the hell's going on here, because I don't think that they even really know the full. I mean, now they do. I talk to them all the time because I tell them not to send anybody else here, because this is like the worst nightmare ever. It's the worst planet I've ever seen. It's just the worst possible thing. And people on Earth make up Christian excuses like, oh, think positively and do this and do that. And these are all like Christian, downloaded belief systems, which is another set of, major mind control at that turn. Okay, so after the stigmatas, things really started accelerating, and my mom really started to begin to drink because she was terrified, because now things are really starting to come out in me. And so I had these little containers, and I would spend time hunting around the yard looking for bugs, and I was actually raising bugs from the dead. There were some bugs that didn't like being raised from the dead, like grasshoppers. Later on, I figured out, well, they only jump forward. They only move forward kind of energetically, so they wouldn't really want to, after they've died, being reanimated wouldn't really be part of their deal. But bees, and to this day, bees do a lot of things for me. They do acupuncture on me. They protect me from people. If I'm in a situation that may be dangerous, bees will just show up even in the middle of winter and create a barrier between me and the situation. But bees, I always had really good luck with. As long as their parts were all there, I could totally reanimate them. It would take a couple days. I had these little test tubes and things like that I hid underneath the deck of the house. So I was always pretty strange. I was always kind of a really strange cookie and had, different kinds of things that I was into. And then I also had a lot of training from the family that I was in. And so the first big wave of star people that came here came, let me just check the time here, folks. I just want to make sure. Okay. The first big wave of star people, and Dolores Cannon talks about this. You can go and she's got stuff on YouTube and books about it. But the first big wave, the people are about, 60, between 60 and 65. And most of them did not make it. I mean, I have one of my clients that I believe is a star. He's some kind of star activation. Not maybe a full star kid here, but not too far away from his life experiences. He may be a couple lifetimes away of entrapment here, but he still kind of has like memories. So he's, anyway. So that was the first wave. The second wave I came in, and a lot of them didn't make it because I think that the remote viewers and the governments of the world and the multidimensional beings, were kind of waiting for us, to pick us off and target us. To either pull us into their programs and work for them, or to pick us off. So a lot of us ended up in psychiatric wards, being experimented on, disappearing. And because we were so strange, I mean, imagine like a normal, family, normal reality family having a kid like this that can, levitate things, or, they would just, put you away somewhere. So a lot of us were experimented on behind closed doors. I think some of us are still experimented on behind closed doors with being stalking. I think at some point or another, you get kidnapped. They will kill you or murder you, poison you, discredit you so that you're kind of living in poverty in a gutter. A lot of things happen. So in the first and second wave, not many of us made it. I know for a fact that I would be considered kind of a galactic doctor because of the type that I do, work I do. I do energetic medicine, and that's probably the major format that I work with. And I've developed a technique to the brain called a reboot, which is a lot like, Carlo Castaneda talking about the assemblage point and Don Juan constantly, bashing him in the right backside to force his consciousness into another type of existence in this reality. So, I do a lot of this kind of work already. And so that's kind of like, I've seen people like that I've worked on and like energetically, in those kinds of capacities. So what I'll see is in different people, like I'll see people who came here like a long, long time ago that have gotten caught up in what I call the heaven experience. And we'll talk about that hopefully after the break time. And they keep incarnating in, and they keep forgetting who they are more and more. But I've seen them, as artists in this lifetime. And then I go back into their timelines and their energy field, and I see them painting on cave walls like a long, long time ago. So, or I'll see them, where they came from their original planet, and they're historians. So I would call them galactic historians that ended up here to, be a slave to this reality until their, battery runs dry, basically. But there's the galactic historians. There's like the galactic, mechanics, the galactic, all these people that have come here over time or been harvested and kidnapped from other locations and other planets to be here, came from different places and have, they have codes and activations that are within them that are, majorly suppressed and downplayed and reconfigured into like a really small format. Okay, so I grew up as a star kid. I was always collecting animals and bugs, and I was always healing them well. Did all this work early on. Then, as I became an adult, I wanted to go into medical medicine, just didn't really work out for me because I would lose everything that I am in the process of it. I would be dehumanized. And so then I just, decided to get into alternative medicine, and I've been pretty much there ever since, and then got into the biodynamic farming, which is kind of like, I call it shamanic farming, basically. And so while I've been, working in this planet, I've been going to school and re-educating myself in a lot of different other mediums that also pertain to health and wellness and cure and healing, so that I could learn, what's going on here. And then, I always put it into my tool bag and I reconfigure it into something else, and adapt it into something else. And I haven't really had apprentices that I could actually teach a lot of the work that I do. But a lot of it is because people don't have the energetic systems to actually, I could teach them maybe some of the techniques, but I could never teach them how to do a lot of the energetic stuff, because I have a format from birth that lends to this kind of work and abilities. Okay, so we talked about my mother's handling, my dad's handling. Okay, so one of the things that when I came here, before I came here, like, let's just say when I was a fetus, I was getting downloaded about this world. So when I was growing up, number one, I had family that I was around all the time that talked in otherworldly stuff, talked about werewolves and talked about real vampires and talked about extraterrestrials and talked about, Bigfoots and talked about the moon and, talked about a lot of these different concepts that people now are just starting to kind of relate with. So I grew up in this like supernatural family, and I thought everybody was kind of that way. So when I started having to go to school and finding out that people weren't that way, was very difficult for me, because I usually would get punished and chastised and ridiculed, in the process of learning how to, make myself smaller than smaller than I really was. So I remember the first day of kindergarten. Well, the first month of kindergarten, here's my mom. She's in a lot of fear, because she doesn't want me to do anything that's going to expose me or them, and that they're going to, come and capture her and maybe capture me and then put us, like in a mental hospital and experiment on us for, the rest of our lives. So me just being alive really terrified my mom, because she just really didn't really have any control over me. And so it drove her to drink pretty heavily because of the overwhelming responsibility and stress. So when I first went to kindergarten, we had to take these tests. I have no idea exactly what they are. In a lot of schools that I went to, I was often taken out with smaller groups of kids to take certain kinds of tests, or to be downloaded with programming. And there's this one programming I call, and I've been trying to find it ever since, which is called the Red Plague programming that I was downloaded into. So this was pretty common for me, that, I would be taken out of my class and I would be put with other people in other rooms and, given certain tests when I was young, or listening to stories by tape and different kinds of programming. So early on, they knew exactly who I was, more so than I knew who I was. So first, in kindergarten, they give you these tests. So after the first month, they invite the parents to come. And as soon as my mom got there, they actually pulled my mom aside. And the reason I'm telling a lot of this stuff now is because I really wanted to do shows in the past that led to a conversation about Star Kids. I was on a lot of different other radio networks. I've had, online TV shows. I've had in-studio TV shows. But nothing ever really led to having a real conversation about this. And so I really felt like it's time. This show is for the Star Kids that are out there. This show is for the parents. And we'll be back and we'll continue our discussion in just a few minutes.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Join me weekdays for my new show, Tell Chris Joe. It's going to be a problem show brought to you live from Kensington. Thursdays, I'm dealing with hot topics, heated debate, what's new around the world, and ring-ins to discuss listeners' problems and offering considered and heartfelt solutions. So join me, Chris Hart, for Tell Chris Joe. Stop what you're doing, grab a cup of tea. I'm coming live from Kensington. Relax, let me entertain you with a coffee bar online. Listeners' very personal problems. So that's Thursdays, 2 p.m. in the afternoon, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. See you there. It's going to be lots of fun.
This is Barbara DeLong, host of Nightlight Radio, inviting you to join me on a cosmic journey, exploring a metaphysical montage of spiritual material, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between, including spiritual readings for those who seek enlightenment. Let Nightlight provide you with equal measure of light, love and laughter, insight, wisdom, and inspiration. Monday nights, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on Studio B, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hey there, you have returned to Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show, and I am your host, Bridgette Lynn Dolgoff, and you can go to Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com website, and you can look at Studio A, and you can find Jannie and our show and information about our show in the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slot. Also, while you're there, you may want to click the funding page, and because we are listener supported, and we could use your help. And Jannie and I could always use help with our farming and our education. And Jannie does a lot of rescuing little farm animals and things like that. And she's on a very small income, and with all the work that she's doing. So if you want to help us and support us, you can help us at consciousnessofeconomics@gmail.com on PayPal, and we would be really grateful for that. So we're talking about star kids. We're talking about my life as a star kid, and there's so much information about this. I made notes to try to focus in on certain kinds of things. So this part of the show, I'm going to talk about some things that I know. At the end of this last hour, I talked about things that I knew before I came here that, it was downloaded kind of as a fetus. And then also about all the things that my family talked about that, were normal, that weren't really normal in our society, but more and more people are starting to find out are pretty normal. And I love what David Icke says. David Icke says that, what people think is our reality, and what really is, or what people think is going on, and what is really going on are two totally different things, and they don't even meet in the middle. There's no bridge for them. So I'm in the part that, is really going on, not what people think is going on. So, for example, one of the downloads that I had before I came here was when I grew up, I always thought that that Atlantis had been found, because I was downloaded as a fetus. I specifically remember being shown a TV show coming into this reality where they were showing that Atlantis was found. I even did a video on my YouTube channel a couple years about it, that you can go see, that talks about this very thing, that I knew that by the end of this lifetime that they would show something on TV, and what would be there, what they will have found. And you can go on to my YouTube channel, which is Consciousness of Economics and Urban Farm Project YouTube channel, and you can look for that video. I think it's called When Atlantis is Found, where I do talk about that. And on my YouTube channel, I talk about a lot of the extraterrestrial activity I have, meetings with my star family. I show a lot of the farming work I do, trying to encourage people to grow food for health and to kind of embrace the planet and nature and learn how to be a co-creator, which I think is, vital. So this earth, doesn't really get destroyed. It would be really sad for a whole planet to be completely destroyed. Okay, so one of the other things too that I saw, that eventually you'd be able to look at the sky and it would be a TV screen, right? And that you would be able to see your president talking to you wherever your house is by the sky. So when I was growing up, I was really confused about the TV, because in my download, the TV was the sky. Now I get that the 5G, that's what they're doing with a lot of the chemtrails and stuff. I mean, there's a lot of components to this, but a lot of it is to create a holographic experience that you can't get away from, that's right there front and center in the sky, on your sky, that's, televised worldwide, with whatever, dictators or whoever wants to control that experience. So now I'm starting to see like that's starting to play out. And I'm also starting to see how they're projecting a lot of stuff onto us by using, the metallic elements in the sky and projecting waves and stuff like that onto it and then down onto us. So they can make like whole towns crazy. They can make people think that, I'm not saying there aren't UFOs and there aren't ETs and there aren't multidimensional beings, but some of this stuff I think now is being projected. I think there's a lot of projected activity with the 5G, and they can do just about anything to your brain with the 5G things. And then it goes into this whole fifth dimensional thing that this bull poopy, we're being sold. And so people don't realize like fifth dimension propaganda and all this other stuff is just a product of 5G. It's just some people take things really hook, line, and sinker. Some people, can actually help themselves to cause a lot of hallucinations and other things that are going on. And a lot of these people who channel beings, I've got another YouTube video on my YouTube channel that talks about something like don't listen to, bull poop channelers because, a lot of them don't even realize what they're channeling. And I go into this whole reason why I know that and, working with my teachers and having first class experience that a lot of these channeled beings are reptilians without biosuits. And they're going to tell people whatever they want to tell them. If you think about it, there's so much channeled material. I mean, has anyone really ever been able to do anything with that stuff? And has any of it really come to fruition? Channeled information is not the same as prophecy. Prophecy, like even with a lot of my native teachers, prophecy is something that's presented, but it has to come true in order for it to be a prophecy. So it's a vision which is not the same as being channeled, because the person who is going on the vision actually is there. And usually, let's say, I think in Crazy Horse, he through his vision, through manipulating his environment, maybe not eating, not drinking water, and doing a lot of prayer over a certain amount of days, forces him into a multi-dimensional dreaming world. We'll call it dreaming world or they would take dreaming medicines, like peyote or different things in order to project them into a relationship, usually with an animal. And then they would travel with that animal looking at everything. And then, sometimes that animal would take them into the future. So they were always seeing everything with their own eyes, hearing everything with their own ears, and coming back from the experience in that experience. They were never really told things by beings, or, that they took hook, line, and sinker. So there's quite a bit of difference in how you're gaining your information and who is manipulating who, So the reptilians are, my one teacher, my one medicine teacher, she told me that the lightest beings, the more shimmery and positive and, golden they were going to be the most negative and dark, because they had to become something else other than they were in order to sell you something and to get you to align with them. So, here we have this whole fifth dimensional ascension propaganda that's going on. And really, people, do you really think that other beings, higher evolved beings, are going to want you on their planet after you have completely destroyed this planet and taken no personal responsibility to actually repair it? Zero. Probably not. You're probably not going to make the cut. And the other thing too is like you have all this other crazy propaganda going on right now about, when the ascension comes or the event, these beings are going to bring these electronic chambers. So, they'll be able to activate your DNA and you'll heal from these diseases. And then, you'll be able to live forever. It's like, those are the same chambers that they use as prisons in the heaven experience. It's no different. It's how they capture your soul, right? You die, they con you into coming up into the light, they feed you some crap, then they shock the poop out of you, and then they put you in an electronic prison, and then they wait to send you back out to this world so that you can be enslaved here more. So it's like the opposite. The more you incarnate on this planet, the less you remember about who and what you really are, right? Because it's a slave world. All right, so how does my star family, talk to me? Okay, so pretty much my whole life, my star family has talked to me from a distance. They send me what I know today. I mean, a lot of it kind of reminds me of like Harry Potter, like a port key, because there's very limited vocabulary that I can use for a lot of the things that I know, that I see, that I feel. And usually what they'll do is they'll send me a dream, or there's some kind of a trigger, right? They'll send me a dream of an object. For example, one time it was this brick that was painted with different kinds of American flags on it. I actually found that in the desert, and I would have never picked it up. I mean, I thought it was really unusual, like it's out in the middle of the desert, seems kind of weird. But I would have never picked it up because I don't pick up items because I don't like the energy on things. I don't pick up money. I don't pick up antiques. I don't pick up anything. I see them as triggers, and I see them sometimes laden with negative energy or poisons or other things. So I don't touch things. So unless I know for sure that it's an object that I need to pick up or touch, then I do so. And then usually there's this download in it. So I keep it for a period of time until like the download, the multi-dimensional aspect of it, the hologram, the hologram or whatever else in it activates. I get the information. And then, once I do that, then the object's safe. And I can literally go put it back out in the desert. And if anybody touches it, they're not going to get the same thing, right? Because it wasn't designed for their DNA. It wasn't designed for their energy field. It was designed for mine. So then it just returns it back to like a normal object. So this is how they've dealt with me, through my whole life. So I've kind of learned that they don't really have access to this planet. I think they had momentary access where they could shoot my spirit down and into maybe the infant that, let's just say, died during childbirth because its head was mangled. And at that point in time, I was thrust into that infant's body, and then I grew up, right? In that body, because they ended up repairing it so that it was a vessel for me. Am I terrified about the heaven experience? I sure as hell am. Even though I've thought a lot about committing suicide and leaving this world, I don't leave it because I'm not certain I can bypass the heaven experience. And I don't want to be caught up in it. And if a lot of you out there are listening, you go back to reading a lot of the Carlo Castaneda books. And the only reason I keep going back to that is because there's very little other information out there. But, one of the things that Carlo Castaneda's teacher talks about is Don Matus, is how bad they hate this world. And that, they've been learning shamanic work and activity to clean up their energetic history so that they were in full power, so they could actually take their physical bodies and leave this world into another dimension and create their own reality, with everything in it that they want. And then be able to travel through the dreaming highways. I call them the dreaming highways, or the inner, the multi-dimensional doorways. And one of my favorite characters is Twin Dreams in the Lynn Andrews books. Is she, was 2,000 years old in her physical body, but she traveled in and out of the dimensional highways, the dreaming world doorways, and would show up, in the middle of nowhere. And so, because I'm like that, my focus is always on wanting to be able to do that kind of stuff. So to bypass the whole dreaming experience. And if you go into looking at a lot of the traditional Tibet, stuff, that's all they do is most of the work is around the chanting and the different songs and everything else is the practice to help one of the lamas when they die to bypass the heaven experience obstacle course for, I don't know, I think it's 30 or 60 days that they do it. So that the person who passed over knows exactly where they're at in the experience. So then they can kind of be over here on the side, and then they can incarnate at will back in. Because if they go through the heaven experience, they're not going to remember who they are, right? This is why I think, the Chinese have really tried to destroy and capture Tibet and a lot of these people and murder them to be able to keep them from, being able to incarnate at will in the future, full memory, full access of all of their life experiences that they were here and before they came here in order to help this world, right? So anyway, so there's a lot of information out there about, people trying to bypass, these types of systems. Let me just see where we're at here in time. So, all right. So the big visit that I had with my star family was in 2014. And I also talk about this on the YouTube, so I'll just talk about it really quick. So what happened was I decided I was going to go do work with a Shoshone elder medicine man named Bavado, which is Rainbow Thunder Heart, and up in Sandpoint, Idaho, to go up there and do like 10 days of ceremony. He was also going to do a power presentation on the world and ley lines and, how they're cut apart and nothing really works in the earth, and how we have to start doing these ceremonies to actually activate and create new meridian points for the meridian points to line up to actually cause activation for the earth to kind of aliven her and renew her so she can start fighting and getting back in the game with us as a multi-dimensional being. So on my way there, I was going through, twists and turns, I was driving through these ravines and stuff like that. And the weirdest song kept playing on the radio. And I literally was just kind of like, wow, that's just kind of a really unusual song, The first time it played, it didn't activate me. I don't know why. But that radio station ended up going dead right after that song. So I had to, search for another radio station. So this other radio station comes up. Within 5 minutes, that song comes on again on a totally different radio station, and boom, it activated me. So I left. So I have no idea who was driving, who was in me, who was driving my van through the ravine, because I was gone for a period of it. I would say I was gone for a good physical time frame, about 20 minutes. But it seemed like seconds when they pulled me up. And so the song activated me. It was a trigger, port key, whatever you want to call it, into a holographic, let's just say, like a recording that they left for me, but it was interactive. And I had been going through a lot of, I've had a lot of head injuries in my life. I've had brain cancer. I should have never survived, just lots of things. And after the brain cancer, I really had this feeling like I had fallen from grace. I felt disconnected from my star family. I felt disconnected from everything. And I was really, super chronically depressed. I couldn't figure out what I had done. And I really felt kind of abandoned, and I really felt kind of betrayed. So I didn't know if the system here had gotten so strong that I couldn't, connect back up, or what had happened. I just couldn't figure it out. So when they pulled me up instantly, I'm sitting in this room, and there's probably, I don't know, I'd say there was probably 200 other extraterrestrial beings, but I couldn't see them. The darkness in this room, but I could see this oval circle with all these chairs lined up. And I could feel that there were other beings who, during this recording for me to be in this holographic experience, were there. But the only thing I could see was the woman sitting in front of me, because light was emanating from her body. And she, looked like, what they would call a Palladian or a Nord, tall, thin, sitting there, light emanated from her body, very pale skin, really long blonde hair. And all of a sudden this download started to happen. And the first thing I hear is, that we're sorry, we're sorry that you feel that you have fallen from grace, but that's not what's happened. And so then there's like 6 or 7 lines of information that boom come through, that download into me from the past, present, future, and all kinds of different situations that happen so fast. Some of it's her voice in my head, some of it's voices of other people, some of it's images of the actual scenarios that happened, and it all went down. After that moment, I was like, I literally had to pull off the road, and I think I ended up crying hysterically for a couple days, because it was just such an intense experience that basically what has been happening to me was a method of slowing me down. So these head injuries, these, illnesses, brain cancer, kind of was forced upon me by my star family, because they needed to keep me alive. There was just a lot of reasons why. And so coming out of that experience, realizing like that I was too strong to manage, which has always been a theory in my life, the biggest wrecking ball, in the area, then I went through a period after that where I was really angry, and I'm still kind of angry, but we've decided to start working together again. I think I'm getting over the anger, because I'm like, these are the people who love me the most. And this is the thing I tell people. You think that there's these extraterrestrials are going to be the new Jesus Christ and they're going to save you. They have an agenda too. I mean, look at what my star family has done. I mean, they've done some of the worst damage to me over my physical life. Do they understand? No, because they have never lived here. They've never had a body here, so they have no idea. But they're doing what they think is best, and they have an agenda. So all these beings have like major agendas. I mean, if you get anything out of this, the only thing that you can trust is you, and use your critical thinking. And we have to just be really careful. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. There's this whole thing with Cobra that's like channeling this information. Cobra won't even come out and tell you who they are. They won't even talk to people in their real voice. Like, hello, critical thinking, which one of these things doesn't go together? Which one of these things doesn't belong? Why are you going to listen to somebody who can't even come out and tell the truth, right? Can't stand in their own power of their experience. And now they're telling people it's okay if people approach you and whisk you off, and you have to leave your whole life behind and everyone you know, and then they're going to take you underground, and you're going to go through this decompression chamber, and then you're going to be living underground, and you're never going to talk to anybody or see anybody ever again. I mean, that should be a red flag. Should be a serious red flag, because a lot of these negative extraterrestrials take people off planet to their food farms, to their restaurants, and people don't want to hear that. It's probably horrifying for them, but it's the truth. We are cattle to a lot of these extraterrestrial beings. They like us poisonous and fat. And I'll tell you what, in my private practice as a traditional osteopath, for my entire life, I have had clients who were half hybrid, reptilian human. I have had clients that are from the giant races, whether, I'm not even going to call them Nephilim, because I don't even really believe that term really fits for them. But I have dealt with these kinds of people in my practice. The reptilian hybrids usually are super intelligent. Usually they have high-ranking jobs in the international world of science and medicine. And, I've sat down and one particular one I talked to about the fact that the reason why they put fluoride and all this stuff in the water is because the reptilians need it. They need an acid state. They are not okay with alkaline, and they do this to planets, but they do it because there's a majority of them. They like the chemtrails. They like the chemicals in the air. It suits them better. The drier it gets, the more desert that the earth becomes, the less the less alkaline it is, the less that humans can live on it. And they understand, my client, we had a whole conversation about this. They fully understand that they feed off of us from a lot of different ways. Physically, they eat us. Energetically, they eat us. A lot of other things that they do. They use our biological materials in order to create reptilian hybrids, a lot of different things. And they understand that as they, get more and more on this planet, then the planet starts to look like Mars, and it cannot sustain human life. And this is their issue for multiple planets, is that they literally, kill off their food supply, and they turn the planet into a place where their food supply can't live. And then the planet, is perfectly for them, but they don't have any food. So then they have to jump another planet, and maybe, where there's humans that are being biologically, human physical biosuits that are being put in by other extraterrestrial beings, because they're, building a new world, right? So, it's a constant. It's constant. So we have to be really careful about the things that we subscribe to and that we believe in, and the propaganda that we're sold. And some people on this planet, everybody wants to just be saved. And there is no quick pill. And we really have to use our mind to think about the things that are going on, so that, maybe we can push back and maybe we can fix it, or maybe it's not going to be repairable at all, which is some of the conclusions that I've come to in my life. So I try to focus more on what I can do in my small environment, in order to make myself happy while I wait out the time. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about a couple other things. So one of the things that I noticed, if we want to call them the men in black or the black ops or whatever kind of we want, is that they can operate multidimensional. I mean, this world is more like the Truman Show than people could ever imagine. And I've literally watched, black helicopters like poof into this reality and then poof out the other side. Black vehicles poof in and poof out. So this is the thing, is the multidimensional beings, they can copy paste themselves into this reality wherever they want to be, in whatever kind of format that they want to be in, with whatever kind of look that they want to have. And so they're constantly doing this in our reality. I mean, most people have, taken the sleeping pill or on the pharmaceutical drugs or had too much vaccines or whatever else, that they don't even notice that this is happening. And so constantly in our environment, things are being copy pasted and manipulated in our environment. So people wonder how they could be talking about one thing and then all of a sudden there's like a car parked out in front of their house, like in seconds. It's because it can be copy pasted there. These beings can copy paste themselves into into a human form, into a men in black form, into a this car, that helicopter. It's a computer enhanced holographic experience, but we think it's real. And that's the other big problem, right? And because it is real, we give it credence to it being real. Then also it can be manipulated as real, like with these reptilian beings coming here and feeding off of us and stuff like that. So there's so many layers in this that it gets super, super complicated. I want to talk about I want to definitely talk before I get out of here, the future lives, and let's see. Right now I want to really talk about, because one of my work on this planet as I become an adult is I really want to start working with legitimate star children. There are a ton of them that are like popping up on the planet. For parents who aren't really sure about their star kids or don't really know how to help them, for the last 10 years I've been really wanting to write some books like 4 books that would be, titles like The Birth of a Shaman, different kinds of scenarios, because star kids really have full potential shamanic abilities and gifts. But they need help to figure out how to make those work, and how not to be repressed, not how to be kidnapped, taken away. And so this whole star kid thing is like a really, really serious topic for me, and me more and more over the last 4 years coming out of the closet and talking about it more and more, which, puts my life on the line, puts, everything about me on the line. But you know what? This system's already destroyed me. They came after my private practice 4 times from 2009 to 2013, totally discrediting me, trying to arrest me. Then I learned law and I fought back because I couldn't get anybody legally to help me fight them. And they're like wolves at the door. They're right there. And because they're multidimensionals that are behind those people, at any moment in time, like there is no security. Anything could happen at any moment. So when you're dealing with star kids, eventually, hopefully, I'll be able to have books, and I'll be able to help parents more, and I will be able to consult, counsel more and consult. One of the things that I would really like to express is that I think Mary Rodwell, who comes out, she is an RN, I think from Australia, who got involved with one of the UFO organizations there in Australia. And she goes out like she's an expert in star kids. And she goes out and she films and photographs star kids and their abilities. She files this information. This is dangerous. This is so dangerous. She is not going to be able to help you to figure out what is going on with your star kid. Only another star person who hasn't been completely damaged can help you to figure that out. So I went through a period in 2014 where things went really bad and I was on the road and I was terrified. I was at a rest stop and I had watched her videos. So in all earnest and in a good way, I emailed her and said, look, I'm in big trouble. I'm being targeted. I'm not safe. I don't have access to my bank accounts. I have no gas. I have no money. Do you guys have any contacts in the United States where I could at least get there and I could, at least have some safety in their backyard for just a certain amount of time? Because things are not good right now. And I'm a star kid, and if she wants to talk to me about that, I can disclose to her a whole bunch of information. So she sends me an email back saying, I can't help you. Our organization can't help you. And we don't have contacts that would help you. And then she said, how about a counseling session? And I'm thinking, by real world terms, you're not allowed to counsel people. You don't have you're not a psychiatrist. You're not a psychologist. You're an RN. And what have they used RNs in the past for? All kinds of stuff. Instead of doctors and other people, they've sent them in to collect information from extraterrestrials, like during Roswell, and all kinds of other stuff, and done the dirty work. And that's when it dawned on me that her organization that she's linked up with and the work that she was doing, they're frauds. And they're probably some kind of government agency. So I do not trust them. And I do not trust her. And anyone that has star kids should be very, very, very concerned. And just because somebody shows up as something, don't look at them as a savior. Do your own work, your own critical thinking. You're putting a very special child, a very developed being, into the hands of people who don't know anything about what they're doing. And to take these, allow your children to be like in a theater setting to show them their abilities and stuff like that so that they can record all this stuff. So what they can later, develop some kind of energy weapon that these kids will be kidnapped and they'll be helping to project. So please, 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 please be careful with your star children. They are very sensitive. They don't know what's going on. This place is very difficult for them. And we don't want to harm them before they have full power and full scale so that they can go out and do the work that they need to do, that they came here for. And so we need to protect them, and we need to cherish them, and they need to be treated like special, like a gift and a present, and not just be thrown out because we have issues about what they can do and their abilities, and that they're speaking in other languages that, aren't languages of earth, and all these different things. We have to be really, really careful when we're dealing with the star children. So, all right. So one of the other things I'd like to talk about is my grandmother, who had my mother and her aunt. She ended up divorcing her first husband, and she ends up marrying another guy, which we knew. You could tell by personality traits, and a lot of in this world we call it either the mark of Cain or the mark of Abel. The mark of Cain are the people who have more Anunnaki or other reptilian hybrid blood, which makes them more aggressive, evil, money-oriented, trampling of other people. Where, the mark of Abel and that lineage is more human, compassionate, caring, community-oriented, and things of that nature. So we know for a fact that my grandfather, back in the day, my grandmother married him because he decided to take care of the kids. And then him and my grandmother ended up having another daughter who is more, let's just say, Cain, and just how she ended up managing her life and taking and trampling and extracting everything from the family in the end. So my grandmother, because she was a prophet, so this can happen in any family, and you don't know it. And so this is long before, this kind of a situation happened, like long before, it was out in the open about that, people were being born with tails, that people had this, extraterrestrial shape-shifting going on, that people could see the extraterrestrial reptilian shape-shifting that was going on, situation. So my grandfather was dying. He had gotten like bone cancer, and he didn't live his life very well. My grandmother was kind of like a saint in the church, and the work that she did, that was her work, helping people to alleviate them from dark forces, to heal them medically. So she was really like, intertwined in her church, as a prophet, because these were her abilities in her DNA. But this was the only place in the public where she could go, where it would help our family to be seen as normal as possible. And let me tell you, Pentecost is not a normal as possible kind of place. It's as abnormal as you can get once you're in it. So she had this major gift of prophecy, and she had gift of vision prophecy while she was sleeping, while she was awake. She had gift of prophecy from her mouth. Sometimes she would speak in like other languages that are not on this planet. And that's pretty normal in Pentecost. But she called me. I think my grandfather, was being kept at home with the bone cancer. And, he'd always been a closet drinker, and he chased, prostitutes. I mean, he had all the signatures of the mark of Cain. But, this was the first time that we knew for sure that there were reptile hybrids. So my grandma calls me early one morning, and she says, "Hey, I got to talk to you about your grandfather." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, I woke up in bed next to him this morning, and, he was literally a snake. And to have a conversation with my grandmother like this, is a perfectly normal thing because, growing up, we talked about so many other things, supernatural, extraterrestrial things. I mean, she was an exorcist. Hello? So these things were not like far-fetched. And so if she said that she woke up in the morning and she was laying next to, a reptilian snake thing, for a fact, that's what happened, right? Don't really need a psychological evaluation for that. So anyway, what was happening was that my grandfather was having a really hard time, holding his human form. So as he was dying, his reptilian self, hybrid, was, the holograph image of him having a humanoid physical body was less and less and less. Now you have more, people that are being born as hybrids that, they're cutting their tails off and lots of these other things that are happening. So they've learned how to kind of use, human DNA and whatever else and, eggs and whatever else, to crossbreed them more so that they actually do have a human form. They might not have human behavior. So that I just want to let people know is true and it's fact, and that a lot of these reptilians are on our planet. And I suspect that only 30% of what we call human on this planet at this time are humans, and that the other 70% are non-human, hybrids, clones, Dopplers, Ging Dopplers, are holographic images. I even have had experience with people that are human androids. I had a situation where one of them kind of went offline for about 20 minutes until their handler came back, and then kind of like whisked them away, and then they came back kind of sorted out. So I had a meeting with some people who work inside the Pentagon about 3 years ago who came to see me about some information. And the person that works inside in the very internal layer said that only maybe like 35% of the beings inside the very, very center are, only 35% of them are human, but a huge amount of them are multidimensional that can actually just shoot a holographic image right in front of you and actually talk to you. So we have a lot of really strange things going on this planet. And for me, that's the norm, the strange. I kind of, move more towards that because I'm kind of that way. But we need to start getting more and more of these good people like myself more out into the public. And so I'll offer, I do charge. And if people want to contact me and then have a session because they're having some health problems or whatever else that they can't seem to get over, or they've got some, beings that are not so good, or you're a channeler and you'd like to stop channeling the being that's attached to you, email me, let me know, let's set up an appointment and let's see if we can get you squared away. You don't have to continue to live with, what is going on with you. There are some of us out here who can, move great obstacles and change the codes and the energetic systems in everything. Okay. The last thing that I probably would like to talk about probably is one of the most difficult experiences, that I've had to date on the planet. I really try to stay away from dreaming medicines. Because I can kind of shift in and out of energy fields rapidly, I don't really need dreaming medicines, right? I don't really need to be in altered states to make that happen. And sometimes if I don't have control, because I've taken some dreaming medicines, things can go really, really haywire for the people around me. And so in ceremonies and stuff like that, I really try to stay, as sober as possible. When I'm working with people, try to stay as sober as possible. Try to stay as sober as possible in this world because, I need to have control at all time. Otherwise, things can go, really rapidly south in an instant. And I don't want to harm other people in my experiences. For example, I first started learning about this situation when I started transporting. And the first time I transported, which means my body and I went somewhere else, was during a sweat lodge, a Lakota all-women sweat lodge. And things started getting really kind of heightened energetically in the lodge. I didn't take any dreaming medicines. And so I was kind of in full control. But there was something that like provoked me energetically. And then on top of it, there's darkness, there's a lot of sound, there's just a lot of activity going on. And I kind of lost it. I completely lost my cookies in a way where I stuck my hand. Mind you, usually the material on the lodge is buried into the dirt, so you can't really get your hand through it. But in order to get cool, I tried to stick my hand underneath there, and then I wanted out. Mind you, it's dark, the door's shut, there's people in there, the ceremony's going on. So I started to dig the dirt to get my hand underneath there so I could feel the cool air on the outside. It was at midnight with a full moon. And the next thing I know, I hear people calling for me. And me and my body escaped out of there. We transported out of there. And I was running barefoot through the desert. And by the time that they noticed that I was completely gone, and they stopped the sweat to come look for me. And, like things like that, like all hell can kind of break loose. And it was good that that energy was targeted and me getting out of there versus me staying in there. And who knows what could have happened to people in there. So one of the things I don't ever do, I love to do the fire. I love to work with the grandfathers. I love when people ask me to do the ceremony and carry the stones. I'm super good at that and holding the energetic space. But I never go in sweats anymore because I don't know what other people's energies are going to be like. And I don't know how that's going to activate me. And then once my energy comes loose, because I'm not in control, because the situation is raising, I don't know what's going to happen. So I choose to abstain from those kinds of situations. And so I abstain from doing dreaming medicine like peyote, DMT, ayahuasca. I really stay away from that. Plus, I don't really like walking into other dimensions that way, because if I'm going in there with dreaming medicines, I'm under an influence, which means that I'm not in control to deal with the spirits that I'm going to interact with. And I get tons of people who call me because their teenagers have taken ayahuasca recreationally, or they've taken DMT recreationally. And now they're, in psych wards because they're claiming that they have like demonic spirits that are eating them and that are attacking them. And then they have these physical injuries because the thing is actually harming them. And once you close that door and you walk out from those dreaming medicine experiences, you can't go back. You can't put that thing back. And because you're under the influence and you didn't have a guide, you didn't have a proper medicine person who's been trained. When you go into a proper medicine lodge, or you go into a proper, peyote ceremony, you go into these different things, those people are ayahuasca shaman. They've been trained to not only help you with your journey, but to make sure and collect you, and so that you don't come back with anything into this world. You come back clean. They travel with you, right? And this is what a lot of people don't seem to understand, is like doing these kinds of things, opening portholes and crossing over into areas, is not safe. And that, precaution needs to be taken, some training, working with the right people if you want to do it in order to happen. Anyway, so what happened was I got invited to do a DMT ceremony. So I decided that I was going to do it with 5 other people, I think, and the person who was controlling the situation, which means that they're going to take the DMT. Each person goes through their DMT experience while the other ones hold the space. And the space is protected so that the people can make their journey, and come back. So they hold the space while the individual person is going through. They make sure they're protected because you leave your body. You're not in your body. And I'm talking about the DMT, the lantern DMT, which is, you're gone for like an hour, sometimes an hour and a half. So when you do these DMT ceremonies, it can be like, 10, 11 hours for each person to go through their experience and each person to hold the space. And the group that I was working with, they work together to do the dreaming medicine, to fix things. They go in energetically, they correct things on grids, they do a lot of other stuff. So these are people that have done this stuff before, they've gotten their legs underneath them, so when they do go in, they're capable of doing other things but tripping. And so they use it as a gateway so that they can change things energetically in this world, and help it to make it better. So when I went, I knew I was just going to I told the guy, I said, I want like the bare minimum, of the dreaming medicine because, a little goes a long way with me. And I went and I was gone and I left. I passed through what I call the everything. I passed the everything to the border of the everything. And then I passed for a long time and then I met the nothing, or what I call the no thing. And the no thing, I undulated in bliss. There was no sound. There was no light. There was nothing. And then once I was pulled off the everything because I had to make the journey back, I realized this is where we are harvested. Our soul bodies are harvested from this. This is where beings have harvested us that we consider our soul, or, whatever we consider the part of us that inhabits the biosuit. And then I came back into the everything. And from that moment on, I could not get in my body. I couldn't remember how to get dressed. After that, I couldn't deal with going to the grocery store. There were just so many things about this world that I had to relearn and really realize that this world is laden with tasks that don't matter, that everything keeps us away from, a unity or a unification with that from which we came, which is the no thing. But once we cross into the everything, where there's sound, information, technology, visual, we're in the everything, which is a constricted holographic computer experience that has been developed for us. And you know what? I think in the early stages of this experiment, I think it was developed in a good way. But now it has so many other computer programs that are attached to it, that it's gone so rogue and it's so bad. So everything in it keeps your reptilian mind, like that. I remember that video that had the dog in it, right? In the house up, I think is what it was called. And the dog could talk and he had the collar and he'd talk. And then all of a sudden he'd be squirrel, and that's all they could focus in on was the squirrel. Well, that's the reptilian mind. So we stay in a state of disease because our hemispheres are not attached. There are 2 different personalities. There are 2 different programs that are operating. It takes a lot to have a unified mind, a unified field, a unified body. Almost impossible because our whole world keeps fracturing us apart, which makes it impossible. So it leaves us left brain lateralized hemispherically. So we're in acid state all the time. We're in a disease state all the time. We're in a reptilian state all the time. So even if we are more human, we are more able, of the Cain and Abel, we're going to lean more towards that reptilian part of who we are. trample the backs of other people, to get what we need to get, in order to have like a, an experience, for ourselves. So, leave you with a video, in case you ever haven't seen it, on TED.com, Jill Taylor Bolt. And she has a video called A Stroke of Insight. She's one of the first brain researchers that actually really got to actually study the brain from inside the brain, because she had a stroke. And she talks about the difference between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, and how we need to step more towards the right hemisphere, which is like the omnipotent, right? It's the God in us. It's the more human in us. If we want to heal and have spontaneous healing, we have to step into that right brain experience. But in order to be human, we have to unify both sides of our brain, because we don't have a torus field that runs right. If you've got your right brain shut off and only your left side is working, that torus field has a speed wobble. Your right brain regenerates and deals with your left side. So your right brain's not on. You wonder why you're having heart problems. You wonder why you've got an enlarged heart. You wonder why you got digestive problems, because guess what? Your right brain is offline. It's no longer dealing with that side of your body. And everything on that side of your body is going south. So anyway, check out Jill Taylor Bolt video, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Bridgette Lynn Dolgoff, carrying stones and digging holes. Thanks so much.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Take a look around, kid. What do you see? Homes being foreclosed, people working 2-3 jobs just to put food on the table and still drowning in debt. Don't get me wrong. This country was founded on great ideals and principles. They've all been ruined by the banks. Open your eyes to banks that are robbing you. You know who my favorite president was? Who? Thomas Jefferson. Because he saw all of this coming and tried to stop it. He fought the banks. JFK too, and they killed him for it. The banking institution is more dangerous than an army, he said. He also said that every generation needs a revolution, Jimmy. The American dream is just that. Just a dream. War is a continuation of politics, only by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. This is our bank. This is our war. And this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio!
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all!
See how the trouble you've started? be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human being. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves